The courtroom was a furnace of tension, every eye fixed on the man at the center, his voice booming over the polished oak desks. Donald Trump was yelling, shouting with a force that rattled the walls, each word dripping with arrogance and fury. The gavel had barely fallen before he launched into a tirade, the kind of spectacle that made headlines before anyone even caught the first sentence. Cameras flashed, capturing every tilt of his head, every sneer that seemed aimed at unmasking weaknesses. Spectators shifted uncomfortably, some leaning forward, some recoiling, as though the air itself had been charged with electricity. Amid the storm, Jasmine Crockett stood like a lighthouse in a hurricane. Her posture was perfect, her gaze unwavering, and her voice, when she spoke, had a calm authority that seemed to slice through the chaos. She didn't flinch. She didn't yell. Her hands rested lightly on the podium, a subtle statement that control and confidence could outweigh bluster and volume. Every sneer from Trump, every dramatic pause was met with steady composure. The contrast was immediate, almost cinematic, the spectacle of rage against the quiet strength of resolve. The courtroom reporters scribbled furiously, their pens struggling to keep up with the spectacle unfolding before them. Social media notifications were already blowing up, hashtags forming before the ink on the first article had dried. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, the kind that makes history feel like it's being written in real time. Every word, every glance, every barely restrained sigh contributed to a growing narrative. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a clash of personas, a battle of dignity versus dominance. The murmurs from the crowd were growing louder, whispers. Spreading like wildfire, people exchanged glances, some incredulous, some exhilarated, as if sensing that they were witnessing something far beyond ordinary courtroom drama. And then, in that heavy electric moment, Crockett tilted her head slightly, a subtle motion that carried the weight of experience and preparation. Everyone in the room felt it, though no one could yet articulate what it meant. But what happened next left everyone in the courtroom and across the country in disbelief. The courtroom was no longer just a room of law and order it had become. A stage, a battleground, where the nation's attention was fixed. Every nuance amplified by cameras, live streams, and the relentless hum of social media. What was happening inside those walls wasn't just a clash of two figures. It was a mirror reflecting America's struggle with leadership, truth, and dignity. Every gesture, every carefully chosen word had consequences far beyond the polished marble floors. The stakes were enormous. One wrong move, one poorly timed retort, could ripple across the country, altering public perception and defining not only careers but the moral compass of the nation. Jasmine Crockett knew this. She understood that her calm, poised presence wasn't merely a personal strength, it was a statement. To falter, to allow anger or panic to seep into her responses, could hand her adversary an advantage that might dominate headlines for weeks. And Donald Trump, with his mastery of spectacle and intimidation, thrived on exploiting those moments of hesitation. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, each second thick with the weight of expectation. Reporters leaned forward, gripping their notebooks. Camera crews repositioned, adjusting angles to capture the drama. Outside, viewers were glued to screens, scrolling in real time, hashtags multiplying. Twitter feeds erupting with commentary, debate, and outrage. The political implications were staggering. This wasn't just a courtroom battle, it was a referendum on leadership, character, and the values the country claimed to uphold. Every soundbite, every reaction would be dissected, replayed, and analyzed. Opinion columns were already forming. In the minds of pundits and influencers, even before the first gavel had fallen that morning, the nation was watching, waiting for a crack in the armor, an audible gasp, a misstep that could tip the narrative. Yet, amidst all the chaos, there was an undercurrent of hope. Crockett's very presence reminded the audience that courage, preparation, and integrity could withstand bluster and intimidation. She embodied the possibility that dignity might yet prevail, that calm reasoning could outshine performative rage. And the FOMO was undeniable. Every viewer, every observer, felt the electric sense that history was unfolding before their eyes. One word, one pause, one decision could change everything. One wrong word could change her career or define the nation's perception of justice. The murmurs of the crowd rose and fell, punctuated by the occasional clink of pens and the quiet rustle of papers. The atmosphere was taut with expectation, a collective holding of breath that transcended politics. Outside, social media feeds exploded, dissecting every motion, anticipating every word. While inside, Crockett and Trump circled each other with the precision of seasoned gladiators. The tension was almost unbearable. A palpable line stretched tight across the room, waiting for the slightest spark to ignite it. As the room held its breath, the villain prepared to strike again. Donald Trump's name had long been synonymous with spectacle. From crowded rallies where chants echoed like thunder across stadiums to interviews that dominated nightly news cycles. He had perfected the art of commanding attention. His voice loud, brash, unapologetic was his primary tool, a weapon he wielded with precision to dominate conversations and unsettle opponents. Anyone who had faced him in public debate knew the pattern: raise the volume, project confidence, and leave little room for reasoned rebuttal. It wasn't just speaking, it was performance. A carefully orchestrated display of dominance that left crowds either enthralled or exasperated, but rarely indifferent. Courtrooms were no different. Trump carried that same instinct for theatricality into legal arenas, turning proceedings into stages where intimidation often outweighed logic. Witnesses, lawyers, even judges could feel the pressure in the room intensify the moment he began to speak. He had a reputation for using his presence to unsettle, for drawing attention to opponents' weaknesses, and for transforming a simple procedural exchange into a media spectacle. His past outbursts, some calculated, some impulsive, were often replayed endlessly across social media, a constant reminder that he thrived on confrontation and controversy. But there was more than just bluster. Trump's arrogance was as strategic as it was visible. Every sneer, every interruptive comment, every seemingly off-the-cuff remark carried a purpose: to assert control, to shift focus away from substance and toward his persona. History offered countless examples. In debates, he had derailed the most meticulous opponents, twisting the narrative with a mix of audacity and spectacle. In interviews, he had weaponized ridicule and sarcasm, forcing journalists and guests to react, often in real time, on live television. The strategy was simple yet effective: overwhelm with confidence, create chaos, and let the world witness the dominance unfold. Yet even the most formidable armor has its cracks. Trump's overconfidence often left him exposed, his loud assertions sometimes betraying a lack of preparation or nuance. Missteps in wording, gaffes during interviews, and the occasional factual inconsistency had become public fodder, criticized relentlessly by both media and political analysts. These moments, however, rarely diminished his aura of control. They were often reframed as proof of boldness, evidence of a man unafraid to speak his mind, a calculated gamble that kept audiences divided and riveted. Dramatic irony was thick around him. The same traits that drew followers into fervent support also sowed seeds of skepticism and frustration among critics, creating a perfect storm of tension and attention cinematically. One could picture the contrast vividly. Archival footage of rallies showed stadiums packed shoulder to shoulder, Trump's hands gesturing broadly, the crowd echoing every phrase. Television screens replayed interviews where journalists were repeatedly interrupted, sentences unfinished, points buried under bluster. In courtrooms, he carried that same energy, leaning forward, voice booming, gaze fixed, as if daring the room to challenge him. Spectators could feel it in their bones, the force of personality that dominated space and conversation alike. And yet, beneath the performance, subtle vulnerabilities lingered. Overconfidence could blind, spectacle could mask error. And history had shown that even the most commanding figures could be undone by their own excesses. Critics whispered about patterns, analysts noted inconsistencies, and occasionally the public glimpsed moments of hesitation or miscalculation. These cracks were faint, but they existed, waiting for a moment when someone with poise, strategy, and composure might exploit them. But the hero of this story had spent years preparing for moments exactly like this. Jasmine Crockett's story did not begin under the bright lights of a courtroom or the glare of national media. It began in the quiet, determined spaces where service and justice intersected. From her earliest days, she carried a sense of responsibility, a drive to fight not for recognition, but for results, for people whose voices had been sidelined, ignored, or silenced. Her path was not an easy one. She faced barriers that would have shaken anyone else, yet each obstacle seemed to fortify her resolve, sharpening her focus and cultivating a calm determination that would later define her public presence. Her journey through the corridors of politics was marked by a deep commitment to advocacy. From championing legislation that protected civil rights to leading initiatives for marginalized communities, Crockett consistently placed principle above personal gain. The challenges were relentless. She navigated systems built to resist change, confronted entrenched sexism and racism, often found herself underestimated or dismissed by those who failed to recognize her talent. Yet she persisted, her every step forward a testament to the power of resilience, preparation, and unwavering conviction. It was in these moments of adversity that Crockett honed her most potent tool, composure. While many might have allowed frustration to seep into their words or actions, she learned to remain measured, to listen carefully, and to respond with precision. Her opponents often underestimated her, mistaking quiet confidence for weakness. And in that miscalculation, Crockett found her advantage. Each interaction, each debate, each negotiation became a training ground, sharpening her rhetorical skill and building the kind of courtroom savvy that could dismantle even the most formidable adversary. Her brilliance did not emerge overnight. Teachers, mentors, and colleagues noted her capacity to articulate complex ideas clearly and persuasively. In early legal cases, she demonstrated a rare ability to dissect arguments methodically, anticipate counterpoints, and deliver her reasoning with clarity and impact. Observers remarked on her presence in the courtroom, the way she commanded attention without raising her voice, the way her calm demeanor carried authority, and the subtle, almost imperceptible ways she guided proceedings toward fairness and justice. These were the foundations of her later triumphs, skills cultivated through persistence, intelligence, and an unshakable belief in the power of principle over pandemonium. Crockett's rise through politics was no accident. Every election campaign, every public speech, every negotiation reflected the same combination of preparation, empathy, and strategic brilliance. She connected with communities because she understood their struggles. She spoke for them because she had lived through challenges that mirrored their own. And yet, despite her growing reputation, she never lost the humility that defined her approach. She remained focused on the work, the mission, and the broader purpose rather than the accolades. The personal sacrifices were considerable. Long nights, missed family events, and relentless scrutiny became routine. And the pressure of representing both her constituents and the ideals she believed in weighed heavily. But each sacrifice strengthened her, each challenge refined her, and each instance of adversity reinforced the sense that composure, preparation, and unwavering integrity were the true measures of power. These qualities would prove essential in the moments to come, where courage alone would not suffice, and where intellect, principle, and strategy would collide with chaos. From her earliest public appearances to the high-stakes battles of recent years, Crockett's rhetorical skill and measured authority had become her signature. She had learned to wield her words like a scalpel, precise and incisive, cutting through noise, spectacle, and intimidation. She had become a figure who could stand firm against bluster, who could command respect without demanding it, who could inspire trust through action rather than theatrics. Her reputation was one of calm brilliance, a hero forged in the crucible of perseverance, intellect, and moral clarity. Now, standing across from Trump, all those years of preparation were about to collide with chaos. The courtroom vibrated with tension as Donald Trump leaned forward, his voice rising with a force that demanded attention. Each interruption was a calculated strike, an attempt to throw Jasmine Crockett off balance, to dominate the narrative and unsettle both the spectators and the media watching live. His words cut through the still air, punctuated by sharp gestures and dismissive scoffs aimed directly at her. The reporter's pens scratched furiously, trying to keep pace with the torrent of claims, while camera lenses pivoted rapidly. Capturing every angle of the escalating drama, Crockett, however, remained unmoved. She met each interruption with a calm firmness that seemed almost impervious to intimidation. Her eyes never wavered, her posture unshaken, and when she spoke it was with measured precision. The contrast was striking: Trump's rage and volume versus Crockett's unwavering poise. Every attempt to provoke her only highlighted her discipline and control. Emphasizing the stark difference between bluster and authority, the crowd shifted. In their seats, some leaning forward with anticipation, others exchanging glances that mirrored the growing disbelief. How could anyone remain so composed under such relentless assault? Social media feeds erupted simultaneously. Clips of Trump's interruptions circulated immediately, overlaid with comments ranging from outrage to admiration. Hashtags trending in real time as viewers debated the unfolding spectacle. Memes began to emerge, portraying the clash as a symbolic battle between chaos and composure. Each online reaction amplified the stakes, turning a courtroom confrontation into a national event that transcended politics, identity, and ideology. The tension was no longer confined to the room. It was rippling outward, connecting people across the country who could feel the intensity through every frame of the broadcast. The judge's expression shifted subtly but noticeably. Eyebrows lifted, lips pressed into thin lines, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary nature of the exchange. Yet even the authority in the room seemed to hesitate, caught in the gravity of a moment that felt larger than procedure or precedent. Every word Trump shouted, every sharp gesture seemed to demand a reaction, a concession, but Crockett gave none. She responded with clarity, cutting through the noise, addressing the substance rather than the theatrics, forcing the courtroom to recognize that her authority did not require volume to be undeniable. The crowd's murmurs intensified, alternating between whispers of shock and bursts of supportive applause when she made particularly incisive points. The energy in the room was almost tangible, a blend of suspense, outrage, and admiration. Observers could sense that history was unfolding in real time, and every passing second amplified the dramatic contrast between the two figures. Trump's attempts at dominance collided repeatedly with Crockett's disciplined calm, creating a cinematic rhythm of conflict and counterpoint, punctuated by the collective breath-holding of everyone present. And then, as the exchanges grew, ever more heated, a subtle shift began to take hold. Trump's interruptions, intended to destabilize, began to fall flat. His overconfidence, previously unshakable, started to show fissures, brief hesitations, a flicker of uncertainty. Crockett's composure only intensified the contrast, making the room acutely aware that the battle was not just about who spoke louder, but who spoke with truth, strategy, and principle. But when Crockett finally spoke, the room couldn't believe what came out of her mouth. The courtroom fell into a hush the moment Jasmine Crockett opened her mouth. Trump's booming interruptions faded into the background, almost swallowed by the gravity of her presence. She began slowly, deliberately, each word measured, her cadence calm but unmistakably commanding. The first sentences were simple, yet precise, grounded in fact, anchored in principle. She reminded the room why she was there, why the law existed, and why dignity and truth were not optional in public service. The contrast was immediate, the spectacle of volume against the weight of reason. Her argument unfolded in stages, each more incisive than the last. Step by step, she dismantled Trump's bluster. She began by exposing contradictions in his claims, calmly citing dates, statements, and evidence, each point landing like a calculated strike. There was no anger in her voice, only the quiet certainty of someone who had spent years mastering her craft. Each refutation was punctuated by subtle pauses, giving the courtroom and the cameras time to register the weight of her words. She knew that timing, like clarity, was a weapon. Every silence amplified the impact of the following statement. The audience reacted almost viscerally. A low murmur rose to the back of the room as her logic cut through the chaos.
Oh.
The journalists stopped typing for a moment, captivated by the precision of her delivery. Every camera lens seemed to linger on her, framing her calm authority against the backdrop of Trump's visible agitation. He shifted in his seat, his confidence momentarily faltering, his interruptions growing less frequent and noticeably less forceful. The man who had dominated conversation with sheer volume now appeared exposed, as though the weight of her reason was pressing against the very walls of the courtroom. Crockett moved seamlessly from logic to moral clarity, articulating not only the facts but the ethical dimensions of the confrontation. She spoke of accountability, of public trust, and the responsibilities inherent in leadership. Her voice resonated. With moral authority, the kind that demanded attention not through intimidation, but through undeniable conviction. She framed the argument in a way that transcended partisanship, invoking values that resonated with anyone who believed that integrity mattered more than spectacle, that truth could not be drowned out by shouting. Social media erupted in real time. Clips of her rebuttal went viral instantly. Hashtags trending across platforms. Hashtag Crockett wins. Hashtag dignity over bluster. Hashtag courtroom moment. Analysts and influencers dissected every line, highlighting her rhetorical precision and her calm, commanding demeanor. Memes portrayed the stark contrast: Trump leaning forward, hands flailing, against Crockett standing unshaken, a pillar of composure. Within minutes, the courtroom spectacle had transformed into a national conversation about principle, courage, and the power of poise under pressure. The crowd in the room seemed suspended, reacting to her every point. Supporters murmured in quiet awe, some nodding subtly, others exchanging glances that carried disbelief and admiration. Opponents, those hoping for a collapse, found themselves caught off guard, witnessing the meticulous unraveling of chaos by measured clarity. Even the judge, who had maintained a neutral composure throughout, appeared momentarily captivated, eyebrows raised, lips pressed in acknowledgement of the skill and authority she wielded without raising her voice. Crockett's next move was strategic, the crescendo of her counterattack. She pivoted from dissecting Trump's claims to a broader, inspirational argument. She framed the courtroom not just as a stage for confrontation, but as a symbol of what the nation could aspire to: justice, equity, and the triumph of preparation and principle over arrogance. Her phrasing was cinematic, almost narratively poetic, and each clause landed like deliberate punctuation on the room itself. Pauses allowed the words to sink in. The rhythm of her speech became a performance in moral persuasion. It's impossible to ignore. Trump's composure, once dominant, had begun to crack. His interruptions faltered, his volume less threatening, his gestures sharper but less coordinated. There was a moment, a nearly imperceptible shift, where he glanced toward advisors, a fleeting expression of unease, as if realizing that the spectacle alone could no longer carry the battle. The scales had tilted imperceptibly at first, but, unmistakably, Crockett had turned the confrontation into a masterclass of logic, moral authority, and calm courage. By the time she concluded, the room was electric. A low murmur swelled into applause, tentative at first, then unstoppable. Cameras zoomed in on her face, capturing the calm triumph of someone who had faced chaos and emerged not only unshaken but victorious in principle. Social media amplified the moment exponentially, clips replayed hundreds of thousands of times. Analysts dissected her argument with admiration, and ordinary viewers across the country felt a surge of validation, pride, and inspiration. The spectacle had become something far larger, a symbol of what measured, principled leadership could achieve in the face of bluster and intimidation. And yet, even as the applause began, the chatter of hashtags and viral clips, there was an undeniable sense that the story was far from over. The courtroom had witnessed a turning point, but the ripple effects were just beginning to manifest. Every word she spoke, every calculated pause, had set into motion a wave that extended far beyond the walls of that room, touching audiences, igniting conversation, and reframing the narrative of confrontation into one of ethical clarity and undeniable strength. As her words echoed, the ripple effect was just beginning. The moment Jasmine Crockett's rebuttal landed, the courtroom's tensions spilled outward, exploding across social media platforms in a cascade of reactions. Clips of her poised, commanding speech circulated instantly, shared, retweeted, and reposted at lightning speed. Hashtag Crockett stuns the courtroom trended worldwide within hours, hashtags multiplying as viewers dissected every word. Every pause, every subtle gesture that had sent shockwaves through the room. Memes appeared, some humorous, others reverent, portraying the stark contrast between Trump's frantic gesticulations and Crockett's serene authority, visual shorthand for the battle of dignity versus bluster that had captivated a nation. Political commentators and pundits rushed to analyze the moment, parsing her argument line by line. On television panels, analysts replayed the exchanges repeatedly, marveling at her rhetorical precision and calm delivery under pressure. Some criticized, suggesting she had overprepared, or that her poise was almost theatrical, but the overwhelming consensus celebrated her composure as a masterclass in leadership. Even critics acknowledged the undeniable magnetism of her presence. The way she had controlled the narrative without raising her voice, turning what could have been chaos into a disciplined, principled victory. Across platforms, ordinary citizens joined the conversation. Tweets, Facebook posts, and Instagram stories poured in. Crockett just redefined courage in public service, one user wrote. Another posted, "If you think volume wins arguments, watch this." Voices from diverse communities, immigrant groups, progressive networks, activists, and students expressed admiration and validation, feeling seen in her steadfast commitment to justice and integrity. Her victory became not just about a single confrontation, but about what she represented: the power of preparation, calm authority, and moral clarity in a world too often dominated by spectacle. The memes alone carried symbolic weight. One showed Trump flailing as Crockett's words hung in the air, captioned, "When arrogance meets principle." Another juxtaposed past courtroom outbursts with her serene demeanor, emphasizing a nation yearning for measured leadership over performative chaos. Each share, each repost, amplified the drama, creating a viral moment that blurred the lines. Between entertainment, political discourse, and cultural commentary, people were talking, arguing, laughing, again reflecting, and able to look away from the unfolding spectacle. Caught in the magnetic pull of a confrontation that felt bigger than itself, news networks framed the story as a turning point, with segments titled "The Crockett Effect" and "A Lesson in Dignity." Analysts debated the implications for public perception and political strategy, noting how a single, calm, meticulously crafted response could shift narratives, unsettle even the most confident adversary, and galvanize public sentiment. Social media polls reflected overwhelming approval. Viewers rated Crockett's composure and logic far above Trump's bluster, reinforcing the symbolic resonance of the encounter. But the impact went beyond applause or viral clips. The courtroom. Drama had entered the national consciousness, serving as a metaphor for broader struggles: truth versus deception, principle versus performance, dignity versus domination. People discussed her approach at dinner tables, in classrooms, in online forums, connecting the moment to their own values, aspirations, and frustrations. For many, Crockett's response offered a model for how to face chaos with clarity, reminding audiences that courage need not be loud, that strength often resides in measured, deliberate action. Amid the excitement and social media fervor, a subtle undercurrent of anticipation grew. The confrontation was over, but its effects were only beginning to ripple through public discourse. Commentators speculated about political fallout, about the reactions in other arenas, about who might rise to challenge or support the example she had set. Every replay, every retweet, every hashtag deepened the sense that this was not just a viral moment, but a cultural touchstone. A moment of collective attention that demanded reflection and engagement. But beyond the headlines, a deeper lesson was emerging. In the silence that followed the courtroom drama, the significance of what had just occurred began to crystallize. Jasmine Crockett's measured words, her calm authority, and her unwavering adherence to principle were no longer just a rebuttal, they were a statement. A lesson etched in real time for anyone willing to watch closely, she had demonstrated. That courage is not the loudest voice in the room, that leadership is not measured by bluster or spectacle, and that integrity carries a weight far greater than intimidation ever could. Crockett reframed the moment, not as a victory over a single adversary, but as a reflection of what true public service entails. Her composure had spoken to every citizen who had ever felt sidelined, underestimated, or dismissed. It resonated with immigrants, women, activists, and anyone who had been told that speaking softly, thoughtfully, and with principle was somehow a disadvantage. By refusing to escalate, by remaining grounded in logic and moral clarity, she had shown that dignity can prevail where anger and spectacle fail. The courtroom, once filled with tension and disbelief, now hummed with a new energy. Observers realized they had witnessed more than a confrontation. They had seen a blueprint for ethical engagement in a world too often dominated by chaos and self-interest. Her victory was not loud, it was enduring. It was in every pause she took, every carefully structured argument, and in the way she connected principle to action, reminding the audience that the truest measure of power is responsibility, empathy, and preparation. Across the nation, people were reflecting. Social media feeds previously ablaze with viral clips now carried deeper conversations about leadership, justice, and the power of measured action. Analysts praised her not merely for defeating a powerful opponent, but for redefining what it meant to be a leader under pressure. Viewers connected her example to their own lives, drawing inspiration from her courage and clarity. They saw in her a model of how to confront chaos with confidence, how to uphold truth when the world demands spectacle, and how to stand firm. In the face of intimidation, her moral authority radiated beyond politics, extending into universal human values. She had reminded a nation that preparation, knowledge, and ethical consistency can overcome even the most formidable displays of arrogance, and that calm deliberation, grounded in principle, can win where bluster only entertains. That courage is not in the volume of one's voice, but in the integrity of one's convictions. And in this cinematic crescendo, Crockett's story became symbolic. It was a reminder that leadership is not inherited or performed, it is earned through dedication, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to justice. It celebrated service above self, intellect above intimidation, and dignity above domination. Every pause, every carefully chosen word had been a testament to what is possible when preparation meets principle. When courage is paired with clarity, and when one stands not for personal triumph, but for the ideals that define a community, a nation, and ultimately, humanity itself. Her example left the audience inspired, hopeful, and challenged. It was a moment that transcended political lines, speaking instead to the universal need for courage, integrity, and thoughtful leadership in a world too often distracted by spectacle. The lessons she imparted were clear, resonant. An enduring dignity can defeat bluster, principle can outlast chaos, and calm authority can change the narrative entirely. And as the nation watched, one question lingered. Who else would rise to meet this moment? The courtroom had quieted, the echoes of confrontation fading, but the impact of that day would not be so easily silenced. Donald Trump's yelling had been met with Jasmine Crockett's calm, its unwavering authority, and in that clash, the nation had glimpsed something profound, that courage, preparation, and principle could triumph over bluster and intimidation. This was more than a single courtroom victory. It was a reminder that integrity matters, that dignity has power, and that one voice, measured and resolute, can shift the course of conversation, perception, and even history itself. Now, it's your turn to reflect. How do you face chaos in your own life? How do you confront moments that demand courage, clarity, and calm under pressure? Every like, every share, and every comment helps amplify this story, transforming it from a viral moment into a collective lesson. By engaging, you're not just watching, you're participating in a conversation about what it means to stand firm, speak truth, and to uphold principle in the face of intimidation. If you've ever been inspired by someone who refused to be silenced, who chose dignity over spectacle, who turned a moment of confrontation into a demonstration of moral clarity, then make your voice heard. Share this video, discuss it with your community, and reflect on how the lessons from Jasmine Crockett's courage can inform your own life. Subscribe to stay connected, to witness more moments where principle confronts power, and to be part of a community that values justice, courage, truth above all else. Remember, the story doesn't end with the courtroom. Every day presents moments to rise, to speak, to act with integrity. Join the conversation, carry the lesson forward, and help ensure that dignity and principle continue to echo far beyond this video.